My name is Maria Cornelius. I'm the president of the East Tennessee Society of Professional Journalists, and as part of our regular programming to recognize Black History Month and the trailblazers in the journalism field, we welcome Calvin Sneed, who is a trailblazer in every sense of the word. He was the first Black journalist to anchor the main newscast in East Tennessee, including Knoxville, at what was then or became WATE. Parallel of this, Tearsa Smith, who also is a trailblazer in journalism, is an anchor for WATE now. Welcome to both of you. Thank you. If we have time at the end, we will do some questions. I am going to slip out of the background here and let Tearsa take this over. And thank you again, Calvin. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you to ETSPJ for providing this avenue for this conversation. When Maria messaged me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing this?" Absolutely. I've met Calvin on a number of occasions. Always the delight, always the keeper of great stories. So it is my pleasure to help facilitate some of those stories to everybody that's joining us. So first, hello, Calvin. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Hello, Tearsa. How are you doing? And before we go any further, let me say something about the Society of Professional Journalists. I found this the other day. Let me see if I can raise this up there. Can you see that? Can you see that?
Yes.
Calvin is actually a member of the Society of Professional Journalists. This thing had an expiration. Well, no, I enrolled on December 6th, 1976. There's no expiration date on this, so I am still a member of SPJ. I just need to be updated.
I love it. Send him the link, Maria. So first, Calvin, let's kick off by starting with your foray into journalism. What gave you that itch to want to be in local TV news? Because you started at a very young age.
I started at 15, and it all. I could do the Ted Baxter thing and tell you that it all started at a radio station in Fresno, California. No, it didn't. But it did start at a radio station in Kingsport, Tennessee, where I went to school. I went to Dobbins Bennett High School. And believe it or not, I actually wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be an actor. When I was growing up in the 60s, African Americans were sparsely seen on television. We had Bill Cosby was in I Spy, but he was co-starring with that. The first African American person that was actually on the air with her own show was Diane Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
Her show was called Julia. I don't know if you remember that. Google that one, folks. You'll love it.
We know that one.
Yeah, so I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to do that. That's what I wanted to do. So when I got into broadcasting, the way I got into broadcasting was kind of a backdoor kind of thing. I'd gotten into speech and theater, in Kingsport at Dobbins Bennett, but I had to take some other courses, some other classes, which introduced me to radio and television instead of the theater. And my teacher back then, her name was a little short lady. Named Verna Ruth Abbott. She was head of the radio and TV broadcasting club up there. And she got me into that and kind of pushed me in that direction instead of acting. And you know what? If she had not done that, I would be in California right now, waiting tables, waiting on my big break. At 70 years old, I would still be waiting. Okay.
Or you could be with you could be on the silver screen, on the big screen right now. You could be with Denzel.
No. No. I am not a Denzel kind of actor. You can hear me talking. I'm more like a Curly Howard from the Three Stooges. But that's what I approached broadcasting that way back then. I didn't have any role models. I had none. The only role models I had were Walter Cronkite, Roger Mudd, Douglas Edwards, Edward R. Murrow, John Chancellor, the early form of Peter Jennings, but I don't know if you noticed, those guys are all white.
Yeah.
Now, I spoke like them. I've got a speaking voice that sounds like them, but that's not me. That's not Calvin. So someone told me, one of my consultants along the way with Frank Mag and Associates told me, don't change. You don't need to be like anybody else. You just be like you. You know, people are either going to like you or they can't stand you. And if they do, click, 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 they're going to go to something else. So just be you, and you'll more than likely be more successful at being you. And that's what I did. That's the way I approached it. I got on at the radio station in Kingsport. I stayed there for 2 years. Hello, George DeVault, who hired me. And it just snowballed from there.
When you started in radio, that didn't stick with you in terms of, okay, radio is the thing. What made you say TV is where I want to switch over to?
Because WKPT had just put WKPT radio had just put a television station on the air. That same year, 1969, they had just put a television station on the air. And oh my goodness, all of this equipment, the tape machines over here, 2 tape machines on either side in the control room. There was a film chain back here. There was this big, monstrous TK41 color RCA camera, the only camera they had for studio use. And I mean, I was like a kid in a sandbox. I mean, you could build things, you could experiment with things. And yeah, I had the radio shift. I had a weekend radio shift, and I went to do that. And that's one of the encouragements that I have for young people, is to just start from the bottom. Don't try to start from the top. I keep running into kids nowadays that, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do in this business? What do you want to do in broadcasting? Because it's still broadcasting. What do you want to do in this? Oh, well, I want to be on the network one day, and I want to live in New York City, and I want to go where all these network correspondents are. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's okay to have that ambition and to go for that ambition, but you're better off starting small. Start small and do it in levels. Don't do it, just haphazardly trying to get into something big, because chances are you're not going to be as successful as you really want to be.
It's so funny you should say that, because the industry is changing, and it is easier for graduates fresh out of school to go straight to a large market.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I see that, while I know it feels like a good opportunity, I just think about all the mistakes you're making in front of this larger audience,
Yes.
as opposed to honing your craft with a smaller community.
And I think that's probably why I never aspired to go to bigger markets. I've had job offers in bigger markets. I mean, I had a chance. Oh my goodness. Even when I was in Knoxville, I used to get job offers from, oh Lordy, Louisville, St. Louis, Atlanta. Got a job offer from WAGA in Atlanta. I got one offer from Orlando. I got 3 from Nashville, and I got 2 from Memphis, Indianapolis, and there was just something about ascending the ladder too fast, I felt. And then when I decided, to limit, what I was going to do, those offers, they looked good, but I just wasn't ready to do it. I did get one offer in Charlotte that I should have taken. That one I should have taken. But it would have taken me away from PM Magazine. And that was PM Magazine. We'll get to that in a few minutes, because that was also at WATE. And that was a 4-year vacation. I loved doing that show. It was the most fun. Tearsa, I got to tell you, the most fun that I've ever had in television, I had at WATE.
Oh, love to hear that.
No question about it. I had the most fun because people accepted me for who I was. This was one instance where not trying to imitate anybody else, trying to be like somebody else, would not have played out. Knoxville was good for me. I got a chance to do what I wanted to do. The management basically left me alone and said, okay, look, we hired you because you could do stuff, because we were impressed by the way you do stuff. So go out and do it. Just go out and do it. We don't care. Just, don't get us sued, but go out there and do whatever you wanted to do. And that's basically what I did. They let me do. I had 5 beats at WATE. We're digressing real fast here.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Well, I had 5. No, I didn't. It was 4 beats that I had at WATE. I covered TVA. I covered Oak Ridge. I covered the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and I covered the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Those were my 4 beats. I was responsible for anything that came out of those organizations. And I just enjoyed doing that. And then people would call me, my gosh, TVA whistleblowers would call me about stuff. Hey, Calvin, you need to go out here and you need to check this out over here, And I would go and I'd look at it and I'm like, yeah, something's not right here. So then you go back to TVA and you say, look, this is what I found out. Help me with this. Help me tell people about this. Can we fix this? Or is it supposed to be like this? And we had a blast doing that stuff.
Let's talk about your early days of reporting. I would say some of my best stories about my time in journalism have been just on the ground, knocking on doors and telling those stories. What are some of the stories that really stick out to you, or just moments while being a reporter?
Well, I got to tell you one that kind of hit me personally was when, and I know it sounds a little self-serving, but when WATE TV switched from NBC to ABC, that was a big deal. Now that had happened before, back in the 1950s, when the Channel 6, Channel 26, and Channel 10 all signed on the air. That had happened then. But it didn't have as much impact as when WATE switched in 1979. At that time, Margie Eisen, whom, God rest her soul, we just lost her just this past week. And Margie was a jewel. I mean, jewel was in her name. She was just absolutely wonderful. And people loved her in Knoxville, and I was one of them. Her desk was in the next room from mine in the basement at Channel 6. But when ABC switched to Channel 6, that was an upheaval that people were it's like, well, wait a minute, where's John Chancellor going? Where is he going? Well, he's going to Channel 26 now, and we were getting all of these ABC folks that previously hadn't been seen that much because Channel 26's signal in Knoxville didn't go out quite as far and was not as effective in getting into households because it was UHF. But that was a big change. That was a change from within. We had to think differently as reporters because ABC tended to skew toward younger people, the younger audience. Not the older audience that NBC and CBS were aligned with. Some of the stories that I can think of also. Oh my goodness! When they closed the teleco down, I was the only reporter inside one of the residents' homes who refused right up until the last minute to give up his land to TVA to close the dam. And there were court cases after court cases after court cases. And this one gentleman, Tom, I can't remember his last name. He later became the mayor of Von Orr. But we were in his house when the federal marshals came to set him out. We were the only reporter in there with a camera. And on the other side of the door were the federal marshals and the local police and sheriff's department coming to evict this man out of his house so that they could close the teleco down. When they opened the door, we were already inside rolling. So we had that advantage. I remember that story stands out in my mind because there was a lot of sadness with that. TVA actually took more land than everybody thought they should have. And so we followed that long after that. The Clinch River breeder reactor in Oak Ridge. I did an infomercial, which, by the way, still lives. I have it on tape. Explaining about the Clinch River breeder reactor. I learned so much about nuclear power. I stood close enough to a uranium 235 canister that I am to my computer right here. I was that close. I could put my hands on it. That story stands out in my mind. I remember the first day, the very first story I did for Channel 6 was when UT declared a snow holiday from too much snow. They'd never done that. UT had never closed its campus for snow. They didn't care how many inches of snow you got. They're going to have class, and we didn't have the luxury of the internet and doing classes online, But this one day they canceled it because there were just absolutely too many wrecks for people to. And I did a story on that. That was the first story I did. The next story I did that I can remember that I'm still hearing about now, even today, at Channel 6, we went out to do snow sculptures around the area. And we'd find the occasional snowman, the big beside the side of the road, There would be somebody over here would have like a table and a desk, carved out of snow and this, that, and the other. And me and a photographer named Glenn Morgan, who, by the way, he's out in Hollywood now making movies.
Oh, okay.
And so we went out looking for snow sculptures, and we found one. It was right beside Interstate 75, just before you get to the Norris exit on northbound 75. Somebody had fashioned a snow toilet.
Oh.
It was huge. This thing was, they must have gotten bulldozers. I don't know what they used to do it, but they got this thing was like, it was like 6 feet high, and it was shaped in the shape of a toilet. And I actually did something with that. I sat on it for stand-up, and I had my legs crossed, and I was just kind of sitting there, and I did a stand-up, sitting on top of that toilet to come out of that. When we came out of that, Sam Brown was trying to stifle a laugh and couldn't. You could hear Margie giggling in the background, and Mike Thurman, you could hear him across the room. They all got a big kick out of that, and I didn't think anything about it, but to this day, I still have people that remember that.
Okay, so what you're telling me is I need to go down to the basement and find some old archives. Is that what you're saying?
You will find it down there. It lives. That story that is on videotape. That story lives down in the archives of Channel 6, down in the basement.
I love it.
Right now.
So did you know when you got started as a reporter, did you know that you wanted to sit on the anchor desk? And how did that come about? How did that opportunity come your way?
I would have been content just to be a reporter. Because I enjoyed reporting. I enjoyed going out there and getting that story and explaining to people how this story is going to change your life. That you need to listen to this. This story is important. I'm not just telling you this because I like hearing myself talk, which I don't. You need to pay attention to this story. So I never really had any aspirations to be an anchor type person. All of that came to me from management. Well, Calvin, we want you to sit with, I'm already doing these shows, the weekend news, the noon news, the morning news, I'd already done that. And they're like, well, we want to put you on the desk with Sam Brown at 6 o'clock, 6 and 11. And I'm like, do you really want to do that? I mean, really? I mean, I didn't think about being an African American doing it. I never approached it that way. I was just being me, and I never thought of myself as anything special, that I could be thrust into the limelight like that. And to this day, I still don't think that anchoring nowadays, it's about the story. It's not about the person giving you the story. It's about the person who gets you into the story, you know? And it's not about you. Once that story starts, you need to just shut up, not do anything, wait for your turn to come back up. You know, the story is the important thing, not the person giving it to you. And that's the way I approached it.
So, but with that mindset, did you feel the weight of being the first African American, anchor in East Tennessee? That had to have struck something with you.
It didn't at first. It didn't. I really did not think of me being an African American being the first at anything. You know, I don't know. I just didn't think about it. I only think about it now because people tell me about it or they ask me questions about it. But I never really thought that it would have made any difference to my job, to what I needed to do. Again, my job was to get people interested in that story. The worst thing you can do is to sit down and do a story and have somebody get up and go to the bathroom, go to the kitchen, or playing with the dogs like mine are sitting here on the other side of me. You know, the object was just to get them interested in the story and to keep them interested. I'll tell you something. I love telling this to college kids that are in broadcasting. When you tease a story, everybody thinks that weather is the number one thing why people watch TV. And they think, you know, well, I'm gonna stick around for the weather. I gotta watch the weather. Weather, to me, is not the most important thing in a newscast. The most important thing in a newscast is the tease. That tease that comes before the commercial break, and then after the commercial break, then there's the story that you're teasing. My job as an anchor right now is to keep you from getting up and running out of the room when the commercial comes on. I want to tease that story to give you just a little bit of what you're going to hear and to make that story the most important thing that you're going to hear all day long. That's what a tease does. That's what it's supposed to do. And if you don't keep people from going out of the room when the commercial break comes on, you haven't done your job. You have not done your job. And if those people get up and run out of the room, then, hey, you failed writing that tease effective enough to keep people from running out of the room.
At the very least, making them work double time to get back in about a minute 30.
Get back in here, folks, because if you don't, you're going to miss the most important story in this newscast. You really are.
Did you enjoy anchoring? Because you still do it today. Clearly, you have a passion for it because you have other interests out there, but you still freelance and anchor today. So just tell us a little bit for those that have never felt the rush of sitting on an anchor desk. It's a different feel. It really is.
It really is. And I'll tell you about one other little thing about Calvin. Calvin is afraid of crowds. He's afraid of groups. The one thing you can do that will rattle me is to put me in front of a group of people.
Really?
Live people, living, breathing people sitting there looking at you, going like this. That's the scariest thing in the world to me. It really is. I've never been able to get around that. And then everybody looks at me and go, well, wait a minute, you talk to all of these thousands of people every day. You know, you're talking to people all the time, all over the place, miles and miles away. You know, how can you be afraid of that? Well, the only reason that I can do that, and so help me, it makes sense when you stop and think about it. The only reason I can do that now, and I got over it, is because when I'm on TV, when I'm anchoring, I'm not really talking to people. I'm talking to a machine, a camera that has a lens on it that's nothing but a bunch of red lights and green lights and circuits and soldered pieces of wire going to and from. That camera is not going to sit there. It's not going to look at you like this. It's not going to look away. It's not going to get up and run off to the bathroom. It's going to stay there. It's always going to be there. I could talk to a camera just like I'm talking to this one right here. I could talk to a camera all day long and never have a problem with it. It's the fact that people are on the other side of that gets me sometimes, and that's something I've had to just not think about when I sit down in front of a camera. I've got to think that yes, you're talking to people, you're relating to people, you're teasing the next story coming up, but I'm just talking to a camera.
I never would have guessed
It just happens to have people on the other end of it.
So let's talk a little bit about PM Magazine, clearly one of the highlights of your career. First, for those who don't know what PM Magazine is, go ahead, give us the tease. What is PM Magazine, or what was it? And why did you love it so much?
PM Magazine was a step into your imagination, is what it was. For those of you who don't know, PM Magazine back in the late 70s, early 80s was a television show, syndicated show out of San Francisco that started in San Francisco, where it showed you little things, little highlights, little bits of life outside of the television news genre. Feature stories, basically. Interesting things that are going on in life around you. And oh my goodness, East Tennessee, are you kidding me? East Tennessee, with the Smokies, and all of the things that go along with being outside, doing things, meeting interesting people. One of the things I used to do at Channel 6 before PM Magazine was we had a feature called 6 on the Road, which was modeled after Charles Kuralt's On the Road series with CBS. And sometimes we would take a camera and just go to outlying areas in the East Tennessee in the market, and we would sit down and basically find a place where everybody comes to at some point. Usually, it's the courthouse steps, it's the benches in front of a courthouse somewhere, and we would just sit there and just wait. We'd set the camera up and we'd just sit there. People would pass us by, they'd wave, hey, Channel 6, and we would just sit there. And it always happened that within 10 minutes, the most colorful character in town would come up to you. You'd meet him or her. They would find you and they would sit down. And the next thing you know, you're doing a story about not only this person, but where they live. And that proved to be very, very effective, very effective. And but PM Magazine, my co-host was May K. Beeler. We got to be so good at what we were doing that people thought we were married. They thought we were married because we would play off each other. We had scripts that we had to read, but we generally ad lib around those based on where we were, what we were doing, what was going on in the background behind us. And they actually thought, well, hey, I'm going to watch these guys here because they seem to get along. They like being with each other. They like doing things, doing this show, with each other. And May is the chief transportation reporter at the Fox station in Charlotte right now. And hey, B, how you doing? And we talk almost on a weekly basis. She's just an absolute dear, just an absolute. We had nicknames for each other, and it got to the point where she'd call me Sneedy, and I would call her P. And we would refer to each other. We'd have the little things down there at the bottom, Calvin Sneed, May K. Beeler, but we called each other what we were comfortable with. And I think that just kind of came across on the air. And that was the idea. That was the whole idea. But as I said, PM Magazine was a 3-4 year vacation. I loved it. I loved spotlighting places, unusual places, things, people. I I found a couple one day that kept a 325-pound pig in their house in West Knoxville.
Hmm.
Yes, huge, huge. The title of the story was Our Son, the Pig. That story lives. It lives. I should put it on YouTube, but it lives. There was another guy.
Strongly encourage you to.
There was another guy in Roane County. He had an auto parts store that had been broken into just hundreds of, well, not hundreds, but dozens of times. He had a break-in at this place, and he lost all kinds of guard dogs to poisoning. Well, a friend of his in Florida said, "Hey, I've got something you might want to try instead of guard dogs." He bought him 6 live rattlesnakes. And this guy turned those rattlesnakes loose in that business at night. Had signs up, dangerous. The premises guarded by live rattlesnakes. And we did a story on that. And yes, I got to hold one of those rattlesnakes. It was
Calvin.
It was terrible. That story lives. That story, I still have that story.
Calvin, I have a story. I have a question in the chat, and Maria, thank you for sending us this question in because it's actually what I was going to ask Calvin along these lines. The question reads: TV is already pressure filled. When you're breaking ground as Black journalists, do you sense added scrutiny and feel a sense of urgency to represent not just yourselves, but those who will follow in your footsteps? And it's a question that spans generations for Black journalists or any journalist of color.
It's funny you asked me that, and it's funny that it's interesting and also very timely that the comment came in. My grandfather taught me when I was growing up in Kingsport that he said, "Son, you're going to have to work harder in this business that you're going into. You're probably more than likely, and you'll find it out real quick, you're going to have to work twice as hard as the white person that's beside you or behind you. You're going to have to work twice as hard because people are going to expect more from you because you're African American and you're going into a field that African Americans don't traditionally go into. So do what you need to do, just do it harder. Just go at it full steam ahead. Don't stop to look behind you. Just keep going." And I never forgot that. And I always thought, like, whenever I would go out on a story and our competition was also on the same story, that I would strive to make my story different than what theirs is going to look like. I already know what their story is going to look like. I already know. They're going to do it traditional, the same, cut and dry, cookie cutter type news. I already know what they're going to do. I'm going to look for the more interesting part of this story. And that's what I'm going to focus on. And that's not as hard to do as you think.
Mm-hmm.
You do have to think. You have to look at it. You have to look at the story. You have to look at all of the angles. And then you pick the one angle of that story that you don't think the other guys are going to do. That's what you concentrate on. You could look at my story and you could look at their story and see 2 different stories coming from the same event, coming from the same story. So yes, you do have to work harder. There's no question about that. Even now, 55 years later, you still have to work harder as an African American journalist. And you have to stay focused. You have to keep your focus on the main thing is the main thing. And if you're covering a story that, where there's just you there, you can kind of sum it up pretty quick, But if you're at a story where the competition is, you got to think like what the competition would be doing. And then you have to look for that area of that story that you can do differently from them. So yes, you do have to work twice as hard. And it's not often that you're having to do it because you're African American, even though my grandfather preached that into me. You're Black. You got to work harder.
What was the reception like in the community when you were out, especially as a reporter, but even when you got on the anchor desk? Um, were you well received, or what was the community like for you?
Well, I think you can tell by my personality that people tended to like Calvin. And I talk about him in the third person because it doesn't seem like it's me. But they had a tendency to like Calvin because Calvin is more like an everyman. He's
Mm.
somebody that feels my pain. Doing consumer reporting down here in Chattanooga and in Columbus, Ohio, was perfect for me because I got to step into other people's shoes. I got to feel what they were feeling. If they'd been ripped off by a roofing contractor or a driveway sealer company or somebody doing home construction work or just some telemarketer trying to get their money, they've been ripped off. And unless you've had that actually happen to you, you have no idea how that feels. This is your hard-earned money that just went out the door. It just went out the door. And I had a tendency to get personal with that. I would get angry with these guys. I got so angry with a guy once who took money from a moving company down here in Trenton, Georgia, that he actually shot at me. I've actually been shot at on a story. And I could hear the bullets pinging through it turns out it was a pellet gun. But hey,
In that moment.
hey, a gun's a gun to me. You know,
Right.
I don't really care what you're shooting at me. It's just that you're doing that. And I actually got mad. I got mad. Yeah, I'm looking around for cover while this guy's shooting at us, me and the photographer. But I'm yelling back at him like, what are you doing? You can't do that. You
Mhm.
know, the audacity of somebody pulling out a gun and shooting at me because I'm doing my job, was absolutely appalling to me. I couldn't stand it. And yeah, the guy was arrested later. We called the sheriff's department. They went and, did the arrest thing and all of that. But still, the fact that somebody would do that to somebody that was doing what they're supposed to be doing was just, again, it was just absolutely appalling to me. And
I,
so I think when people realized that I was going to go to bat for them, no matter what. Now, yeah, I'm going to call the other side and I'm going to get their opinion of all of this problem, because I got to have two sides. I can't just go on the air with one person's side to a story. I've got to go get the other side as well. And a lot of times the other side didn't want to talk to me about it. And I'm like, I'm going to give you every opportunity. I'm doing a story with these people. So, if you want your side to be told, which I genuinely want you to tell your side of the story, you'll go on camera with me, you'll give me your side, and then we'll let people decide. Now, if you want to fix the problem, hey, fine, no problem. Hey, Calvin gets a success story out of it,
even better.
Yeah, even better. Yeah. But I insist that you go on camera and tell me the story because I do not want to be unbalanced with this story. And I have often told people that, okay, I'm going to call these guys and I'm going to tell them, what you're telling me. So what you're telling me has got to be truthful because they're going to tell me something that's another side to this story. So somehow we got that in there. And I was very, I always felt like I was being fair. That was the one thing about that. Television nowadays is accused of not being fair. It's accused of not telling both sides to a story, not feeling somebody else's pain, enough to relate that to the audience. And in a lot of instances, it is guilty of that. It is guilty of that. It is. We've got to go the extra mile to tell both sides of a story. And I never put a story on the air that did not tell the other side.
Mhm.
I'm very proud of that.
What is your advice, especially for young journalists of color who are looking to get into this field? Because it's changed so much since when I started. And so just looking over your career, it really is kind of night and day right now.
It is different. It is different. We were just talking just before we started this stream that uh, we can't really call it television anymore because it's more than that. It's these things. It's cell phones. It's streaming services. It's computers. It's something that has evolved into something that looks like television. The only thing that relates it to television now is the fact that there are still television towers on top of ridges and peaks around us, like Sharp's Ridge up in Knoxville, Signal Mountain down here in Chattanooga, Holston Mountain up in Tri-Cities. It's evolved into something that you basically need to stay on top of technology, especially new technology. The only new technology now is something that's already 2 days old. It's already been here for a while. You're just now getting caught up in it. You need to be on top of every type of technology change that's out there, because television now is technology. It's not so much us doing the news, as much as it is technology. You got to stay on top of that. You got to be willing to change. Calvin is difficult to change. Calvin is old school. I don't like to change. Calvin is one of those guys, and again, I'm talking to him in the third person because I think he's hiding over here. But Calvin is a person that does not like to change too much from what got me in the business a long time ago. Because those basics, those basic things that you learned from Walter Cronkite, from John Chancellor, from Douglas Edwards, from Roger Mudd, from those guys, that is still out there. That's still out there. It's just now you get to put that with new technology and you still get to tell that same story, but in a new medium. So
I
you
want to
got to
open
be
up.
willing to change.
Excuse me. I wanted to just let you all know, for those that are watching, we thank you so much for joining us. Please, if you have questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat or use the raise your hand function. And we would love to invite you to be a part of this conversation. And for those that are just joining us, again, we have Calvin Sneed with us, a veteran journalist who still dabbles.
Just
Even though he's
rambling off at
retired.
the mouth. That's all Calvin does.
It's okay. That's all I do too. It's totally fine. We're in the middle of Black History Month, and you're part of our Black History series here with ETSPJ. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of telling those stories? Every year for Black History, TV stations all across the country will feature and highlight, those stories in the community, telling the highs and the lows of the Black community. Talk a little bit about why those stories are so important.
First of all, let me tell you, and Calvin's getting ready to pontificate, so just
Okay.
bear with me here. I'm one of the silent few that thinks that Black History Month shouldn't just be a month. Black history transcends all 12 months out of the year. We tend to sometimes pigeonhole things within a certain time. And what happens on February 28th? What happens? What are we talking here? Friday. What happens after that? We move into March. Well, do we forget Black history? Do we just forget about that? Because it seems like we only emphasize things in Black History Month. And there's nothing wrong with that. But hey, the Black history that I know of, it starts from January 1, goes all the way to December 31st. It needs to be, and it's not just, we pigeonhole these things like Indian or Native American Heritage Month,
Yes.
Or Cancer Month, or Alzheimer's
Awareness. Yes.
Awareness Month. Those things go on all the time. We should be hitting people with African American events and occurrences and celebrations every day of the year. So yeah, that's one of the things that I hope changes, over time, that we start realizing that it's not just Black History Month. It's just Black history period. And it's Black history is American history. Don't get me started on that.
It is. It is.
It really is. It is American history, and it needs to be taught as part of history. See, I can kind of, because I'm retired now, used to be I couldn't say anything like that because that's like, oh, okay, journalist, you're not supposed
Wait,
to.
I can't say that?
Yeah, you're not supposed to say that.
Calvin, I'm with you. I was going to say it anyway.
Yes, you're supposed to keep an open
true.
mind about everything, Calvin. Well, hey, I'm sorry. I'm retired now and I can say it. We need to have Black History Month 12 months out of the year. And we need to couple other celebrations like that and commemorations, like American Cancer Month, Awareness Month, Alzheimer's, things like that. We need to do that all year long.
Calvin, I have a question in the chat, and this is from Catherine Luther. She wants to know, what message would you extend to journalism students who might be discouraged by the current climate in our country and are contemplating the thought of not going into our field?
Don't give up on a sure thing. Don't give it up yet. Don't just decide that just because things look bleak right now, you know as well as I do that things change overnight. This country changed politically overnight. It was called November 5th. Everything changed after that. That should not be a deterrent for anyone who has the drive, who has it in here, that, hey, I think I can make a difference. If you think you can make a difference, guess what? You can make a difference. You have to think that. And you can't be discouraged by what you read, what you hear. If it's in your heart, go for it. Don't give up the opportunity because, quite frankly, hey, society might be losing a good broadcaster that way.
A good storyteller, yes.
Yeah, you got to tell the story. You got to tell both sides of the story. If you don't do that, you're not doing your job. And if you don't write a good tease in the 6 o'clock news to keep people from running off to the bathroom during the commercial break, you're not doing your job. Go back and do it again. Go back and write that tease again.
And as we wrap, what are you working on now? What is Calvin obsessed with? What are you doing?
Bridges. Here, bridges. That's what I do. I've had this thing about bridges since I was 10 years old. I had it when I was in Knoxville. I had it when I was at UT. I had it when I first started broadcasting in 1969. I had it then. I had this fascination for steel truss bridges, which puts me at odds with TDOT a lot because TDOT wants to destroy those bridges. And update. I don't. They just don't want to tear them down. They want to put a new bridge there that, number one, doesn't require as much maintenance, but is safer than this thing that you see here. But every bridge like this one behind me here that I'm looking at here, every bridge has a story to tell. It has a story about the community that it's in. Those stories form the fabric of what makes us what we are. If you ever look at a television commercial showcasing a new car, a car dealership, you see all these commercials, in various shows on television. They'll always show one of those new cars on one of these bridges.
You're right.
You always see a steel truss bridge either in the background or as a backdrop for that car driving at some point in the commercial. There's a reason for that, because these bridges form that fabric that we're talking about. They form the basis for what made this country years ago. And yeah, this is your grandfather's bridge. I got to tell you that. It's this one here, this particular one here is 1929 between Paducah, Kentucky and Brookport, Illinois. That's how long it's been here. But this bridge was the basis for people leaving the South and going to the North for better jobs. I mean, that's the story that it tells. Every bridge has a story. We just have to get out there and look for it and see how it fit into the community, because you'll find that it actually shaped the community that it's in.
Now, you have heard about the Gay Street Bridge here in Knoxville, right? Have you been keeping up
Yes,
with that?
yes.
Okay.
And they better find some way to fix that bridge. We saved the I say we the powers that be saved the Walnut Street Bridge down here in Chattanooga. It's about to close to undergo a renovation to make it better for what it is. They're not changing the bridge; they're just making it better and bringing it up to standards. Knoxville needs to do the same thing with the Gay Street Bridge. Don't let that bridge go away. Knoxville is that bridge. Okay? Let me say that again. Knoxville is the Gay Street Bridge. And you cannot let anything happen to it. If it needs repairing, if it needs fixing, by George, you get out there, you find the money, you cut off a program here. Hey, they're doing that now. You know, you cut off a program here, you move some other stuff around, but you put money in that bridge, because that bridge is your past, it is your presence, your present, and it's going to be your future. Okay, so you save that bridge, you find some way to do it. It's too historic to let anything happen to it.
And on that note, I will end on your passion project. Uh, Thank you so much, Calvin, for talking with us this afternoon, and just imparting just a piece of your portion of Knoxville history and the part you played in it. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And as I say, folks, I'm always down here in Chattanooga. I'm on Facebook, Calvin Sneed Bridge Hunter. Go there. I still do the bridge columns in Kingsport and Johnson City, and this has been fun. This has been, but I still enjoyed it. I talk too much, but
No,
I
you
enjoyed
don't.
it, and I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep.
No, you and I must say, especially as one Black anchor to another, thank you, because we don't see a lot of ourselves out there, and so it is always so wonderful when you can tap into the mind of somebody who did this before you. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, and it's good to talk to you. We'll have to do lunch sometime.
Let's do. I'll talk about birds. You talk about bridges. We'll bring our hobbies together, and maybe we'll dabble some news.
Once I get caught back up in the Society of Professional Journalists here, send me an invite. And hey, I'd like to keep doing this. I need to come and speak to some classes at UT, because I want to do that. I want to impart, before we run out of time here. I want to impart what I've learned over the years, because it's as I used to say, it's not your father's Oldsmobile anymore.
That's right.
It's not. It's totally different, and you've got to be prepared for it.
Well, thank you. I'll turn it over to Maria Cornelius, president of ETSPJ.
Thank you so much, Calvin and Tearsa. I want to thank you for your perseverance, for your dedication, and for pouring so much into your craft and your communities, particularly in an environment that doesn't always pour back into you. You face obstacles that white journalists do not face. I'll be blunt about that. Thank you for handling it with such grace and with such joy and with such you made a difference today. I'll put it that way. Your voices resonate, and I thank you so much for being here. And I agree, this shouldn't just be a month. It should be a standard. It should just be accepted. Unfortunately, we are not there yet, but I have hopes that we will get there in my lifetime. But my respect for both of you is tremendous.
I'm hoping also that the future broadcasters can get into this business and stick with it. Don't be afraid to stick with it. You are what you are, and you are as good as you think you are. And if you think you're good, let that translate onto the air. Just don't give up. Don't give up. Mm-hmm. And thanks to the people of Knoxville and Kingsport and Chattanooga for watching Calvin all these years. I mean, and Columbus, Ohio. That means a lot to me. It really, really does. And for you to accept me for me, yes, that means something to me. It really does.
And I want to thank Melanie Staton and Vince. They set this up. They put me in touch with you. They're the reason we got you in here. So I want to give a spec. They're sitting here. They're staring back at us. So they're in there. They're waving now. But Calvin, I don't know if you're a baseball fan. We're opening a new stadium here in Knoxville. I have season tickets right behind the home dugout. You are welcome to come sit with me anytime if you would like to go to a baseball game.
Absolutely.
In Knoxville.
Absolutely.
You've got my contact info now. Tearsa, you know you're welcome. You can drag your husband and kids and anybody else that wants to come.
There's nothing like baseball in Knoxville. Trust me. From the days of the KJs at Bill Meyer Stadium.
That's where I started.
I loved it. And I'm also having a good time with Tony Botello right now in UT. You know,
oh, everybody is.
Hey, go Vols. Go Vols. Class of 77 here. Go Vols.
Well, thank you again, especially to both of you. I will hit the stop recording now so y'all can realize everything you're saying is not being recorded. As soon as I find it, where did it go? There it is. All right, we are going to sign out from our ETSPJ programming. Thank you again to everyone.